During a training exercise, a group of SEAL rookies noticed a woman standing near the range in plain uniform. No insignia, no badges. One of them, feeling bold, asked with a smirk, "So, what's your rank, ma'am?" The others chuckled, expecting nothing important. She looked at them calmly and replied with one word, "Admiral." The laughter stopped instantly. The base loudspeaker confirmed her arrival moments later, a decorated combat veteran whose missions remained classified. The rookies' faces turned pale as they realized who they had just mocked. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about unsung heroes who command respect without demanding it, consider subscribing for more. Naval Special Warfare Training Center, Coronado. Dawn broke over the obstacle course as SEAL candidates pushed through their morning evolution. A late October chill hung in the air, mingling with the scent of salt water and sweat. The rising sun cast long shadows across the manicured grounds, highlighting figures moving with practiced precision through one of the most challenging military training programs in the world. Boone Castellano led his squad through the final stretch of the morning run, maintaining a punishing pace that kept them at the front of the group. At 28, he carried himself with the natural confidence of someone born into a military legacy. Third-generation Navy, his grandfather had been a frogman in Vietnam. His father, a decorated SEAL, who died during a classified operation 15 years ago. The Castellano name opened doors, but it also created expectations that Boone both embraced and rebelled against. Behind him ran Zaria Kapoor, former Olympic swimmer, whose transition to military life had surprised everyone who knew her. At 26, she'd traded medals and endorsement deals for grueling training and anonymous service, driven by reasons she rarely discussed. Her water skills were unmatched in their class, her efficient movements betraying thousands of hours of disciplined training. Rafe Thatcher maintained pace just behind her, his wiry frame belying unexpected strength. 24 and the youngest of their squad, the former chess prodigy approached each training evolution like a complex puzzle to be solved, his analytical mind constantly seeking optimal pathways through any challenge. Where others relied on brute force, Rafe found efficiency and strategy. Quinlan Frost brought up the rear, the brooding 27-year-old marksman, maintaining perfect form despite his position. His stoic expression never changed whether they were first or last, his focus unwavering regardless of external circumstances. His background remained largely unknown to the others, his personal disclosures minimal beyond what was required for training. "Castellano, you're drifting right again," Commander Arcturus Blackwell shouted from his position near the finish line, his voice cutting through the morning air with practiced authority. At 42, Blackwell embodied everything expected from a SEAL instructor, demanding, uncompromising, with an eye for details most would miss. "Maintain your line. This isn't a solo exhibition." "Copy that, Commander," Boone responded, subtly adjusting his path while maintaining speed. He'd been pushing ahead again, a habit Blackwell constantly corrected. Leadership wasn't about being out front alone. It was about bringing everyone forward together. A lesson his father had apparently mastered, one Boone still struggled with. They crossed the finish line as a unit, transition immediately to their next evolution without pause. No congratulations for finishing first. No acknowledgement of their superior time. In SEAL training, meeting the standard earned you nothing but the right to face the next challenge. 5-minute water break, then report to the firing range, Blackwell ordered, already turning his attention to the next group approaching the finish. "Frost, your rifle qualification recertification is overdue. Make it a priority today." "Yes, sir," Quinlan acknowledged with a nod, his expression unchanged. The squad moved toward the water station, their conversation resuming once Blackwell was out of earshot. "Anyone else notice Blackwell's been harder than usual this week?" Rafe asked, filling his canteen. "The washout rate's climbing faster than any class in the past 3 years. I checked the numbers." "Admiral's coming for inspection," Zaria replied, taking measured sips. "Whole base is on edge. You know how brass visits go. Everyone suddenly remembers protocols they've been ignoring for months." "Which Admiral?" Boone asked. "McKnight was just here last quarter." "Vice Admiral Marshfield," Quinlan offered, surprising them with his knowledge. "Naval Special Warfare Deputy Commander. Word is she's implementing new selection criteria across all special operations programs." "Marshfield?" Boone frowned. "Never heard of her." "That's the point. Quinlan said simply, sealing his canteen and moving toward the range without elaboration. The others exchanged glances. Quinlan rarely volunteered information. When he did, it usually proved significant. "How does he know these things?" Rafe muttered. "He never talks to anyone outside our squad." "He listens," Zariah responded. "Unlike some people." Boone ignored the implied criticism, checking his watch. "Break's almost up. Let's move." The firing range stretched before them, targets arranged at various distances across the carefully maintained field. Standard qualification exercises would occupy most candidates for hours, but their squad had already demonstrated exceptional proficiency. Today would focus on advanced techniques, moving targets, adverse conditions, synchronized fire patterns. 40 minutes into the exercise, Boone noticed her. A woman standing at the perimeter of the range, partially obscured by a support column. Plain, unmarked utilities. No insignia, no rank indicators. Her short silver hair was the only sign she might be older than the average instructor, her weathered face suggesting years of service under harsh conditions. She carried a simple notebook, making occasional notes while observing their performance with unnerving focus. 2 o'clock, Boone murmured to his squad between exercises. "We have an audience?" The others followed his gaze, quickly noting the observer. "Civilian contractor," Rafe suggested. "Psychological evaluation, maybe?" "Wouldn't be in uniform," Zarya countered. "And contractors always wear identification." "She's been watching Quinlan specifically," Boone noted. "Hasn't taken her eyes off his performance." Quinlan, currently engaged in a precision shooting exercise, gave no indication he'd noticed their observer, though Boone suspected little escaped his attention. When the exercise concluded and Blackwell called a short break, the woman remained, still making notes in her book. Something about her stance bothered Boone. The perfect posture, the way she distributed weight slightly favoring her right leg, the measured assessment in her gaze. This wasn't some administrative observer. This was someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. "I'm going to find out who she is," Boone decided, setting down his weapon after proper safety protocols. "Careful," Zarya warned. "Remember what happened when you questioned that visiting Master Chief last month?" "I'm just being friendly," Boone smiled, his natural confidence surfacing. "It's a restricted training area. We have security protocols." He approached the woman directly, his squad following a few steps behind, curiosity overriding caution. As they drew closer, Boone noticed additional details. A thin scar running along her jawline, hands that showed evidence of past breaks, calluses consistent with decades of weapons handling. "Excuse me, ma'am," Boone said with practiced politeness that barely concealed an undertone of territorial assertion. "This is a restricted training area." The woman looked up briefly from her notebook. "I'm aware," she responded, her voice calm and measured, then returned to her notes without elaboration. The dismissal was so casual, it momentarily threw Boone off balance. He exchanged glances with Rafe, who stepped forward diplomatically. "May I ask who authorized your presence?" Rafe inquired, his tone genuinely inquisitive rather than challenging. "I did," she answered simply, continuing to write. The squad exchanged glances again, irritation growing at the cryptic responses. Boone, already annoyed by her presence and now increasingly frustrated by her attitude, decided to establish the hierarchy more clearly. "And what's your rank exactly, ma'am?" he asked with a hint of a smirk. "Just so we know who we're dealing with." The others chuckled quietly, the implication clear. They assumed she was either a civilian contractor overstepping boundaries, or perhaps a junior officer assigned to some administrative function. Either way, she was an outsider in their domain, and Boone wanted that understood. The woman finally looked up from her notebook, steel gray eyes meeting Boone's, with an intensity that momentarily made him regret his approach. She studied him for a beat longer than was comfortable before responding with a single word. "Admiral." The word hung in the air between them. Before any of them could process this response, Commander Blackwell appeared beside them with surprising speed, snapping to attention with a crisp salute that conveyed genuine respect rather than mere protocol. "Admiral Marshfield," Blackwell said formally. "We weren't expecting your inspection until tomorrow, ma'am." As if to confirm this extraordinary revelation, the base loudspeaker activated with precise timing. "Attention all personnel. Vice Admiral Delphine Marshfield, Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, is conducting an unscheduled inspection. All section heads report for briefing at 0900. The color drained from the candidates' faces as realization set in. Not just any admiral, the second in command of their entire operation, a figure whose name carried weight throughout the special operations community, had been standing quietly observing them while they performed. And Boone had just addressed her with the kind of casual disrespect that could end careers before they began. Boone opened his mouth to formulate an apology, but Admiral Marshfield's raised hand stopped him before he could speak. "Save it, Candidate Castellano," she said, her tone neither angry nor forgiving, simply matter of fact. "Your performance speaks for itself, both the good and the problematic." The fact that she knew his name without introduction sent another jolt of realization through Boone. She hadn't randomly wandered into their training. She'd been briefed on them specifically. Instead of dressing them down further, Marshfield simply nodded to Blackwell. "Continue the exercise, Commander. I'd like to observe without interference." To the stunned candidates, she added, "Carry on with your training. That's an order." As she walked away, Boone noticed something the others might have missed, a slight asymmetry in her gait, favoring her right leg. The outline of what appeared to be a prosthetic was barely discernible beneath her uniform pants. When she reached the edge of the range, the sleeve of her utility jacket shifted slightly, revealing a glimpse of a distinctive scar pattern on her wrist, one Boone recognized from medical briefings, characteristic of defensive wounds from close-quarters combat. "Back to positions," Blackwell barked, his voice carrying an edge that promised consequences later. "And Castellano, when this evolution is complete, you and I will have a discussion about appropriate protocols when addressing superior officers." "Yes, sir," Boone responded automatically, his mind still processing what had just occurred. As they returned to their stations, Zarya hissed, "An admiral! You just sassed a vice admiral." "How was I supposed to know?" Boone whispered back defensively. "By not assuming," Quinlan said quietly as he recalibrated his scope. "Assumption is the first step toward failure." Over the next week, Admiral Marshfield became a constant presence during their training. Unlike other visiting brass, who typically arrived with entourages and departed after brief ceremonial appearances, she observed everything personally and often alone. She carried the same simple notebook, making detailed notes while watching various exercises with unwavering attention. The candidates learned to perform under her watchful eye, though her intentions remained mysterious. Some instructors became noticeably more demanding when she was present, while others seemed almost nervous under her scrutiny. Training intensified to levels that pushed even the top performers to their limits. Rumors circulated that Marshfield was implementing a new washout protocol to eliminate candidates more aggressively. The class size shrank daily, with previously solid performers suddenly failing key evaluations or mysteriously deciding to drop out. The pressure created a palpable tension throughout the training facility. During a particularly grueling night navigation exercise 5 days after her arrival, Zarya discovered something disturbing, evidence that someone had tampered with their compass calibrations and map coordinates. The alterations were subtle enough that most teams would have missed them, potentially navigating into dangerous areas beyond the exercise boundaries. "This wasn't an accident," she told her squad mates after recalibrating their equipment. "Someone deliberately altered these settings." "Are you sure?" Rafe asked, double-checking her corrections. "That would be a serious breach of protocol." "I've been orienting in wilderness competitions since I was 12, Zarya replied firmly. "These were changed by someone who knows exactly what they're doing." When she reported her findings to Commander Blackwell the following morning, he dismissed her concerns as paranoia resulting from sleep deprivation. "Candidate Kapoor, you've been averaging less than 4 hours of sleep for 6 days, Blackwell stated flatly. "Equipment malfunctions happen. Recalibrate as needed and focus on the training objectives." That evening, Boone was returning from an authorized call to his mother when he overheard a tense conversation coming from an administrative office. He recognized Admiral Marshfield's measured tones, though her words carried unusual intensity. "The security protocols have been compromised, Commander," she was saying to someone Boone couldn't see. "This is the third incident this month across 2 separate facilities." "With respect, Admiral," came Blackwell's response. "These are training scenarios designed to test adaptability. Unexpected challenges are part of the program." "These aren't program challenges, Arcturus," Marshfield replied, using Blackwell's first name in a way that suggested a longer professional history than Boone had realized. Someone is systematically testing response patterns. I've seen this before. The candidates aren't ready to be brought into this, Blackwell argued. If there's a security concern, let proper channels handle it. Proper channels are exactly what I'm concerned about, Marshfield responded cryptically. Keep your eyes open. Watch for patterns. Trust no one you haven't personally vetted. Boone retreated before he could be discovered eavesdropping, his mind racing with implications. This wasn't a standard inspection or training evaluation. Something more serious was happening, something that had brought an admiral into the field personally. The following day, during a rare moment alone, Boone encountered Marshfield reviewing files in the tactics room. He formally approached and stood at attention. "Admiral Marshfield, if I may," he began with proper military courtesy. "I want to apologize for my squad's disrespect during our first meeting. It was unprofessional and unacceptable." She studied him carefully before responding, her expression unreadable. "Arrogance is a luxury afforded to those who haven't yet faced true combat, Castellano," she said finally. "Your father understood that. James never assumed rank based on appearance, did he?" Boone felt as if the floor had shifted beneath him. "You knew my father, ma'am?" "I did," she acknowledged, closing the file she'd been reviewing. "Staff Sergeant James Castellano, exceptional operator, even better human being. He saved 11 lives during Operation Kingfisher. The official record says 7. Remember that discrepancy." Without allowing him to process this revelation or ask follow-up questions, she nodded toward the door. "Your squad is waiting for you at the demolition range, candidate. I suggest you don't keep them waiting." Stunned, Boone saluted and departed, his thoughts in turmoil. His father had died when Boone was 13, the circumstances classified beyond what his family was permitted to know. An operational training accident was the official explanation, one his mother had never fully accepted. Now, an admiral was casually mentioning an operation he'd never heard of, with details that contradicted official records. When Boone researched Operation Kingfisher later that evening, he found minimal information available. A classified mission from 15 years ago involving extraction of non-military personnel from a hostile zone. The only available photo showed a team of operators with faces blurred for security, but in the background, partially visible, was a female officer with a commander's insignia. The timestamp matched the period shortly before his father's death. The next day brought new concerns. During a hostage rescue simulation, one of the instructors discovered live ammunition mixed, with training rounds in several magazines. The entire exercise was immediately aborted. An investigation launched into what could have been a fatal security breach. That night, unable to sleep, Boone went for an authorized run around the base perimeter. Near the administrative parking area, he witnessed Admiral Marshfield engaged in an intense conversation with a civilian in an unmarked government vehicle. Their body language suggested serious disagreement, with Marshfield repeatedly shaking her head at whatever was being proposed. When she noticed Boone approaching, she quickly ended the conversation. The civilian drove away with unusual speed, leaving Marshfield standing alone in the poorly lit parking area. Rather than question or reprimand Boone for being nearby, she simply acknowledged him with a nod before walking briskly toward her temporary quarters. The next morning, Rafe approached Boone with disturbing information. Using his analytical skills, he had been mapping patterns in the accidents and equipment failures that had plagued recent training evolutions. "It's not random," Rafe explained quietly as they prepared their gear for morning exercises. "The sabotage appears targeted at specific candidates with unique skill sets. Our squad remains intact only because we've been watching each other's backs." "You think someone's deliberately washing out particular candidates?" Boone asked, keeping his voice low. "Not washing out," Rafe corrected. "Testing, evaluating responses to adversity and unexpected threats, like a secondary screening process within the official program." "Or something worse," Boone muttered, thinking of Marshfield's concerns about compromised security protocols. Later that day, Zarya shared another troubling discovery. Using skills that somewhat stretched the boundaries of authorized candidate behavior, she had observed Commander Blackwell receiving encrypted communications on a device not standard to base operations. That evening, the squad met privately in a maintenance shed between scheduled evolutions, sharing their growing concerns. "Something's happening beyond standard training," Boone summarized after they had each presented their observations. Marshfield isn't here just for routine inspection. We should report these concerns up the chain of command, Rafe suggested. To who? Zarya countered. If Blackwell is involved, who can we trust? Blackwell isn't the problem, came an unexpected voice from the doorway. They turned to find Commander Blackwell himself standing there, his expression grim. But you're right about one thing. This isn't standard training anymore. Instead of reprimanding them for unauthorized assembly, Blackwell secured the door behind him and spoke in hushed tones. Admiral Marshfield isn't here just to evaluate you. She's hunting a mole within our training program, someone grooming candidates as sleeper assets. The revelation stunned them into momentary silence. Several SEAL teams deployed overseas have experienced mission compromises in the past year, Blackwell continued. The pattern suggests an intelligence breach originating from training programs like this one. Candidates recruited before or during training, then activated once deployed. Why tell us this? Quinlan asked, speaking for the first time during the meeting, his usual stoicism replaced by focused intensity. Because you four have demonstrated awareness beyond most candidates, Blackwell replied. And because after tomorrow's evolution, you'll be separated for individual assessment, you need to understand the stakes. The warning proved prophetic. The following morning, Quinlan's bunk was empty, his personal items gone. Official word claimed he had voluntarily dropped out during the night, a common enough occurrence during SEAL training to avoid immediate suspicion. But when Boone returned to his own quarters after morning exercises, he found Quinlan's tactical knife and an encrypted communications device hidden beneath his mattress, along with classified communications that would implicate Boone as the very mole Marshfield was hunting. Before he could decide what to do, security forces entered his barracks. "Candidate Castellano," the lead officer announced formally, "you're required to come with us immediately." As they escorted him across the base, Boone noticed other security teams entering the quarters assigned to Rafe and Zarya. The carefully constructed world of training and evaluation was unraveling around them, revealing something darker beneath. They brought him to the main administrative building, but instead of the standard disciplinary offices, he was escorted to a secure conference room where Admiral Marshfield waited alone. To his surprise, she dismissed the security team. "Sit down, Castellano," she ordered once they were alone. The Admiral's manner had changed. Gone was the observing evaluator, replaced by something harder and more focused. This was a combat officer in her element. "I didn't take those communications," Boone stated immediately. "And I have no idea where Quinlan is." "I know," she replied simply. She placed a worn challenge coin on the table between them, identical to one Boone's father had given him before his death, a special operations commemorative that few would recognize. "Your father carried this during Kingfisher. He gave one to each member of his team." Boone stared at the coin, the implications racing through his mind. "You weren't just his commanding officer," he realized aloud. "I was his commanding officer because I was on the ground with my team," Marshfield confirmed. "I knew your father because we operated together. The mission went sideways. We were compromised from within, just like what's happening now." She rolled up her pant leg, revealing what Boone had only glimpsed before, an advanced prosthetic replacing her lower left leg. "Sniper fire during Kingfisher," she explained, matter-of-factly. "The same day your father didn't come home." The revelations landed like physical blows. Boone had spent years trying to piece together the truth about his father's death from redacted reports and vague condolence letters. Now, an admiral was casually confirming his mother's suspicions, that James Castellano hadn't died in a training accident, but in active combat during a classified operation. "I've been running a shadow investigation for years," Marshfield continued, "separate from official channels because I don't know who to trust. There's a pattern of infiltration targeting special operations training across all branches. Candidates identified, recruited, and positioned as long-term assets. And you think Quinlan is part of this?" Boone asked. "I know he is," Marshfield replied with absolute certainty. Just like his father was 15 years ago during Kingfisher. Before Boone could process this information, the lights throughout the building suddenly cut out. Emergency systems activated, bathing the room in red warning lights as alarms began to sound throughout the base. "They're making their move," Marshfield said calmly, retrieving a sidearm from a hidden compartment in the conference table. "Situations like this reveal where true loyalties lie, Castellano. Your father made his choice 15 years ago. Now you'll make yours." Through the window, Boone could see security teams moving with tactical precision across the grounds, but something about their deployment pattern seemed wrong. They weren't responding to a threat. They were establishing a perimeter. "What's happening?" he asked, as Marshfield checked her weapon with practiced efficiency. "A calculated extraction," she replied. "They're not here for you, Castellano. They're here for me. The question is, whose side will you and your squad choose when the moment comes?" From the harbor beyond the base perimeter, Boone heard the distinctive sound of approaching helicopters. Multiple aircraft moving fast and low, their running lights darkened. Whatever was coming would arrive within minutes. "Trust no one wearing rank they haven't earned," Marshfield said, tossing him a security access card. "Find Kapoor and Thatcher if you can. East Utility Tunnel leads to the communication center. If I'm not there in 20 minutes, get to the harbor master's office and use frequency 739er. Authenticate with Kingfisher Asset Secure." "And then what?" Boone asked, his training kicking in, despite the surreal circumstances. Admiral Marshfield smiled for the first time since he'd met her, a tight expression that held no humor, only grim determination. "Then we find out if you're truly your father's son, Castellano." The base shook with the impact of what sounded like controlled detonations at the perimeter. Precisely timed diversions to cover the approaching helicopters now visible through the window. As security systems failed across the facility, Boone realized the truth. This wasn't a breach from outside. This was an operation being executed by people with intimate knowledge of the base's protocols and defenses. People already inside. Have you ever noticed how the quietest person in the room often commands the most respect? Someone whose authority comes not from volume or decoration, but from earned experience and quiet confidence. Share your thoughts below and subscribe to explore more stories about hidden strength and unexpected leadership. 3 days after the power outage incident, security had tightened across the Naval Special Warfare Training Center. Armed guards now patrolled areas previously monitored only by instructors. Training continued under heightened scrutiny, the atmosphere tense with unspoken awareness that something significant had occurred. Boone Castellano had expected to be detained after the chaos of that night, but instead found himself back in regular training rotation with his squad minus Quinlan. No official explanation was provided for the base-wide security failure beyond a vague statement about systems testing and infrastructure assessment. Admiral Marshfield remained present, her evaluations becoming more personal and intense. She now observed their training directly, often standing close enough to hear their communications, her notebook filled with increasingly detailed observations. The utility tunnel had been exactly where Marshfield indicated. But when Boone had reached the communication center that night, he found it already secured by base personnel. No sign of the Admiral or the mysterious extraction team. By morning, the official narrative was firmly established. A scheduled security drill had been conducted, albeit with minimal advance notice to base personnel. "They're lying to us," Zarya whispered during a brief water break between training evolutions. "I counted 3 helicopters that night. Military aircraft, no markings. That wasn't any drill." "Keep your voice down," Boone cautioned, noting a security officer watching them from across the training yard. "We stick to the official story until we know more." "And Quinlan?" Rafe asked quietly. "Still nothing?" "Official record shows voluntary withdrawal," Boone replied. "But his belongings weren't collected. Someone cleared his space professionally. Nothing personal left behind." The conversation ended as Commander Blackwell approached. Since the incident, his demeanor had changed subtly, still demanding and professional, but with an underlying tension that hadn't been present before. "Admiral Marshfield has requested your squad for specialized tactical assessment," Blackwell informed them. "Report to Training Facility C at 1400 hours, full gear, combat load." "Yes, sir," they responded in unison, exchanging glances once Blackwell moved away. "Why us?" Rafe wondered aloud. "Half the remaining candidates have better technical scores." "Because we've seen too much," Zarya suggested. "This is either evaluation or elimination." Boone remained silent, the Admiral's words echoing in his mind. Trust no one wearing rank they haven't earned. But how to determine who had truly earned their position? His father had taught him that genuine authority wasn't displayed through insignia, but demonstrated through actions and decisions under pressure. Training Facility C was smaller than the main complex, typically used for specialized close-quarters battle instruction. When they arrived, they found it empty except for Admiral Marshfield, who stood reviewing documents at a tactical planning table. "Secure the door," she ordered without looking up. Once Rafe had complied, she activated an electronic countermeasure device from her pocket. "This room is now secure from electronic surveillance. We have limited time." She laid out several photographs showing Quinlan meeting with unidentified individuals at various locations around the base. Frost wasn't just a candidate. He was placed here specifically to identify and evaluate potential recruits for external interests. "He was a spy?" Rafe asked, examining the images with analytical precision. "An asset," Marshfield corrected. "Probably recruited years ago, positioned through careful background construction and exceptional performance. His marksmanship wasn't accidental. It was professionally developed long before he entered this program." "Who's he working for?" Zarya asked the question they were all considering. "That's what we need to determine," Marshfield replied. "Foreign intelligence services have been attempting to penetrate special operations training programs for decades. What's changed is the sophistication and the long-term approach. They're not seeking immediate intelligence. They're placing sleeper assets for activation years later, after deployment to sensitive positions." "Why tell us?" Boone asked, echoing Quinlan's question from days earlier. "We're just candidates." "Because you've already demonstrated awareness beyond most operators, let alone trainees," Marshfield answered. "And because someone has attempted to frame you, Castellano, which means you've been noticed. All three of you are now either potential assets or potential threats to whoever is running this operation." She revealed what Boone had already suspected. The security failure 3 nights ago had been a cover for Quinlan's extraction by his handlers. They pulled him out because he was compromised, but not before he completed his primary mission, identifying candidates suitable for recruitment and marking others for elimination. The equipment failures, Rafe realized aloud. The tampered navigation tools, the ammunition swap. They were tests. "Assessments," Marshfield confirmed. "Evaluating problem-solving, adaptability, ethical boundaries. The kind of information useful for determining potential assets." "What do you want from us?" Boone asked directly. "Your assistance in a counter-operation," Marshfield stated simply. "Officially, you'll continue training. Unofficially, you'll help me identify the full network operating within this facility." "Isn't this something for naval intelligence or NCIS?" Zarya questioned. "In an ideal world, yes," Marshfield acknowledged. "But we have a serious problem. We don't know how far this network extends, including into those very organizations. This operation stays completely off official channels until we identify the full scope." The implications were staggering. A senior admiral conducting a shadow investigation using SEAL candidates as assets, circumventing official security protocols. "This is beyond irregular," Rafe noted carefully. "It's potentially illegal." "So is infiltrating military training programs to compromise national security," Marshfield countered. "I'm not ordering you to participate. I'm asking for volunteers who understand the risks." "And if we decline?" Zarya asked. "You return to regular training, officially oblivious to anything beyond standard evaluation," Marshfield answered. "But understand that whoever framed Castellano won't stop there. You've all been marked in some way. The question is whether you'd rather be reactive targets or proactive counters." The 3 candidates exchanged glances, unspoken communication flowing between them after months of training together. Finally, Boone spoke for all of them. "What's the mission, Admiral?" Over the following days, they executed Marshfield's counter-operation, while maintaining their cover as regular candidates. Using techniques that definitely exceeded standard training protocols, they began covert surveillance of base personnel, particularly focusing on the training cadre and administrative staff with access to candidate evaluations. "Follow pattern disruptions," Marshfield had instructed. "Look for behaviors that deviate from established routines, especially regarding communications and information handling." They discovered that 5 other candidates from their original class had been receiving coded instructions through seemingly normal communications channels, embedded information in family letters, unusual care packages, digital messages hidden in permitted entertainment files. "They're being activated," Rafe concluded after analyzing the pattern, "given specific performance parameters to meet, certain instructors to impress or avoid." More disturbing was what they observed during a covert monitoring operation of the base communications center. Commander Blackwell, whom they'd begun to trust following his earlier disclosure, was meeting secretly with a senior intelligence officer they didn't recognize, discussing Marshfield with surprising animosity. "The Admiral has overstepped her bounds this time," the intelligence officer said, reviewing something on a secured tablet. "She was supposed to identify candidates for the advanced program, not conduct a private investigation. She's becoming a liability," Blackwell replied, his tone suggesting concerns beyond mere procedural issues. "The deputy director wants this contained before she destroys the entire program." "Which deputy director?" Boone asked when they reported this conversation to Marshfield during their next secure meeting. "That's the question, isn't it?" Marshfield responded, her expression revealing nothing. "Naval Intelligence has 3 deputy directors, each overseeing different operational domains. None of them should be interested in routine training evaluations." "Unless it's not routine," Zarya suggested. "Unless there's an official program running parallel to the standard training, something Blackwell knows about, but you're not cleared for." "Or something I'm not supposed to be investigating," Marshfield corrected. "The question is whether this parallel program is legitimate compartmentalized operations or something unauthorized." The implications grew increasingly disturbing, not just foreign infiltration, but potentially an unsanctioned program within their own command structure, operating without proper oversight. "We need access to the secure communications facility," Marshfield decided. "That's where the control systems would be located, if this is an official program with documented authorization." "That building has the highest security on base," Rafe pointed out. "Biometric access, rotating guard shifts, electronic countermeasures." "Which is why we'll use my access codes," Marshfield replied. "My position allows entry for inspection purposes. The risk is that accessing those systems will alert whoever is running this operation that they're being investigated." "It's a trap," Boone realized. "Whether we find evidence or not, we'll expose ourselves." "Precisely," Marshfield acknowledged. "Which is why you'll need to be prepared for immediate extraction if this goes sideways. Contingency protocols are already in place." That night, using Marshfield's credentials, they infiltrated the secured communications facility during a scheduled systems maintenance window. The timing provided plausible cover for the Admiral's presence while minimizing staff encounters. Inside, they discovered a dedicated secure terminal, isolated from the main network. Using administrative access codes that surprised even Rafe with their high-level clearance, Marshfield accessed a hidden directory structure containing surveillance files on candidates throughout multiple special operations training programs. Not just SEALs, but Army Special Forces, Marine Raiders, and Air Force Special Tactics. "This is far bigger than I suspected," Marshfield murmured as the data populated the screen. "They've been tracking and evaluating candidates across all special operations communities for years." "What's Blackfish Protocol?" Boone asked, noting the classification header on several documents. Marshfield's expression hardened. "I've never heard of it, which is concerning given my position and clearance level." As they continued exploring the database, they found surveillance photos of themselves among the target files. Comprehensive assessments dating back to before their entry into the program, suggesting they had been identified and evaluated long before selection. "They've been watching us since before we even applied," Zarya realized, reviewing her own file with growing anger. "My Olympic training, my university research, even my relationship history. It's all here. The question is who they are," Rafe noted, scanning through administrative logs. "These access patterns suggest oversight from outside standard military command structures." Before they could dig deeper, a voice from the doorway froze them in place. "Admiral, you're good, but predictable." They turned to find Quinlan standing there, very much present and now armed with a sidearm that clearly wasn't standard training issue. His formerly neutral expression had been replaced by cold professionalism that seemed far more natural to his features. "You always did have a soft spot for underdogs and lost causes," he continued, addressing Marshfield directly. Behind him stood Commander Blackwell and several armed security personnel, their weapons held ready but not yet aimed directly at the group. "Admiral Marshfield," Blackwell announced formally, "you're relieved of command, effective immediately. Under authority of Naval Intelligence Division, you're being detained on suspicion of espionage and treason." "Fascinating accusation," Marshfield replied calmly, showing no surprise at this development. "I'd be interested to see the authorization for detaining a flag officer without Joint Chiefs' approval." "Authorization code Tango 7 Alpha," responded the intelligence officer they had observed earlier, stepping forward from behind the security team. "Countersigned by the Secretary of the Navy 12 hours ago." Marshfield locked eyes with Boone, subtly shaking her head, a warning not to resist or reveal anything further. "Predictable indeed," she said to Quinlan, allowing herself to be handcuffed. "Just like your father." The brief flash of emotion across Quinlan's normally controlled features confirmed Boone's suspicion. Whatever connection existed between Marshfield and Quinlan went deeper than their current confrontation. The next 24 hours passed in isolated confusion. Boone, Rafe, and Zarya were detained in separate secure rooms, ostensibly for their own protection while an investigation proceeded. The official story presented to them portrayed Marshfield as a rogue officer who had been using her inspection authority to access classified programs beyond her clearance, potentially compromising operational security. During Boone's interrogation, the intelligence officer, now identified as Director Haywood of Naval Intelligence Special Activities Division, presented evidence suggesting Marshfield had been feeding classified information to foreign operatives for years. "Your loyalty is commendable, Castellano," Haywood said, reviewing notes on a tablet. "But you've been manipulated by someone very skilled at creating false narratives. The Admiral has a history of going beyond authorized parameters, creating her own interpretation of mission objectives. More disturbing were the documents Haywood showed him next, evidence suggesting Marshfield had been responsible for the failure of Operation Kingfisher, including intelligence assessments identifying her as the source of the security breach that had resulted in multiple casualties, including James Castellano. "She manipulated you through your father's memory," Haywood explained with seemingly genuine sympathy. "It's a tactic she's employed before, identifying candidates with personal connections to her past operations, exploiting emotional vulnerabilities to recruit assets for her unauthorized investigations. The evidence seemed irrefutable: witness statements, forensic communications analysis, even psychological evaluation profiles suggesting Marshfield had developed fixations on conspiracy theories following her combat injury. Yet something didn't align with Boone's instincts. Small inconsistencies in the timeline, the convenient appearance of comprehensive evidence immediately after Marshfield's detention, and her final cryptic comment about Quinlan's father all suggested a deeper game in progress. When Boone was finally permitted to return to his quarters under guard, he found an opportunity to briefly communicate with Rafe through a maintenance access panel between their rooms, a vulnerability they had identified weeks earlier during routine security assessments. "They showed you files about Kingfisher?" Rafe whispered, confirming Boone's suspicion that they were being fed coordinated information. "And psychological profiles suggesting she's unstable," Boone confirmed quietly. "Too perfect, too comprehensive. Intelligence doesn't assemble that kind of package unless they've been building it for months or years." "Preemptive countermeasures against potential investigation," Rafe agreed. They were prepared for her to start asking questions. "We need to find Zarya," Boone decided, "and determine where they're holding Marshfield." "Security rotations change at 0200, Rafe noted. "That's our window." Using skills honed through months of training, they executed their escape with precision that would have impressed their instructors under different circumstances. They located Zarya in a separate detention facility, her security lighter due to what appeared to be an administrative error in her classification status. "They're trying to turn us against each other," she reported after they extracted her. "My interrogator suggested you both had already provided statements implicating Marshfield in security breaches." "Standard interrogation technique," Rafe observed. "Divide loyalties, offer limited immunity for cooperation." "The question is where they're holding Marshfield," Boone refocused them. "She wouldn't be in standard detention facilities." "High-value security section," Zarya suggested. "East Compound, Building 7. It's the only facility with appropriate protocols for detaining a flag officer." As they moved cautiously through the darkened base, emergency alarms suddenly activated throughout all sectors. Announcement systems declared a code phantom, a protocol none of them recognized from standard training or emergency response procedures. In the confusion that followed, they witnessed something extraordinary: Quinlan and 4 other candidates being rapidly extracted by helicopter from the main landing zone, accompanied by unidentified personnel in civilian clothing. Commander Blackwell, appearing distressed rather than authoritative, was forcibly escorted aboard one aircraft, his expression suggesting this evacuation wasn't proceeding according to any plan he recognized. "That's not a security response," Boone observed from their concealed position. "That's an asset extraction under duress." "Something's gone wrong with their operation," Rafe agreed. "They're pulling out priority personnel." When they reached Building 7, they found the security protocols active but the guards absent, apparently responding to the broader base emergency. Using Marshfield's access card, which Boone had retained from their earlier operation, they entered the high security wing, expecting to find the Admiral under heavy guard. Instead, they found her detention cell empty, with no sign of struggle or forced extraction. A small challenge coin, identical to the one Marshfield had shown Boone earlier, had been left centered on the vacant bunk. A deliberate message for anyone knowing what to look for. "She's free," Boone realized. This might be her countermove. Examining the coin more carefully, Boone noticed a microdot embedded in the embossed design, a technique his father had once mentioned for emergency communications. When illuminated with Rafe's specialized flashlight, the dot revealed coordinates and a simple instruction: Command Center B, Level 2. "That's not on any base map," Zarya noted. "At least, not any we've seen." "It wouldn't be," Boone replied. "Contingency facilities are compartmentalized information. My father mentioned them once. Hardened command posts designed to maintain operational control during base compromise." Following the coordinates led them to what appeared to be a maintenance access in the base administration building's substructure. The unmarked door yielded to Marshfield's access card, revealing a stairwell descending below the mapped levels of the facility. 2 levels down, they encountered a security checkpoint manned by personnel they didn't recognize. Operators wearing unmarked tactical gear rather than standard Navy uniforms. Before Boone could determine how to approach, one of the operators recognized them. "Castellano, Kapoor, Thatcher, you're cleared. Admiral Marshfield is expecting you." The security door opened to reveal something none of them had imagined existed beneath the training facility: a fully operational command center, staffed with personnel and unmarked utilities. Monitoring systems displaying information feeds from what appeared to be multiple military and intelligence networks. Admiral Marshfield stood at the central planning table, now dressed in full tactical gear rather than her usual plain utilities. She acknowledged their arrival with a nod that betrayed no surprise at their presence. "Good work finding your way here," she said simply. "We've had to accelerate the timeline." "What is this place?" Zarya asked, taking in the sophisticated operation happening around them. "Contingency Command Facility," Marshfield replied. "Established after 9/11 to maintain operational continuity in case of base compromise. Few people know it exists, which makes it ideal for our current situation. The infiltration goes deeper than we thought," she continued, directing their attention to the main tactical display. Quinlan was just the visible layer. They've been placing sleeper assets in special operations teams for nearly a decade. The display showed tracking data for the helicopters they had witnessed departing, along with what appeared to be live surveillance feeds from multiple positions around the base and beyond. "Who's they?" Boone pressed, no longer willing to accept partial explanations. Before Marshfield could respond, a secure video connection activated on the main screen. The Secretary of the Navy appeared, his expression grave as he assessed the situation through the video link. "Admiral, the Joint Chiefs are assembled and awaiting your assessment," he stated without preamble. "Mr. Secretary," Marshfield acknowledged formally, "Blackfish protocol has been compromised at multiple levels. Asset extraction patterns confirm external coordination. We have confirmed penetration of at least 17 training cycles across 4 special operations communities." "Your recommendation?" the Secretary asked. "Immediate security freeze on all recent graduates from identified programs, full counterintelligence screening before operational deployment," Marshfield replied without hesitation. "And sir, we need to activate Kingfisher contingency." The Secretary's expression hardened at this last request. "That's a significant escalation, Admiral. The political implications alone would be extraordinary. So is the compromise of our entire special operations selection architecture, Marshfield countered. We're not dealing with isolated intelligence gathering. This is systematic placement of long-term assets in sensitive operational positions. After a moment's consideration, the secretary nodded. Kingfisher contingency is authorized. God help us all if this goes public before we've contained it. As the connection ended, Boone, Rafe, and Zaria exchanged stunned glances as the full implications became clear. Delphine Marshfield wasn't merely a vice admiral in naval special warfare. The deference shown by the secretary, the extraordinary authority she wielded, the existence of this hidden command facility, all pointed to a position far beyond her publicly acknowledged role. "You're the director of naval intelligence," Rafe stated with sudden certainty, the pieces finally aligning in his analytical mind. Marshfield neither confirmed nor denied this directly. "My official position is less relevant than the authority I've been granted to resolve this situation," she replied carefully. "What matters now is that we have confirmation of what I've suspected for years, a coordinated long-term infiltration of our special operations training programs by multiple foreign intelligence services, possibly working in concert." "But why the deception?" Zaria pressed. "Why the understated rank, the plain utilities, the entire charade of being a visiting admiral conducting routine inspections?" "The most effective way to observe a compromised system," Marshfield explained, "is from within, wearing a face your adversaries underestimate. Female officers of a certain age become practically invisible in military hierarchies, present but rarely considered significant threats to covert operations." She brought up satellite imagery showing Quinlan and his extraction team heading toward a rendezvous point offshore. They believe they've successfully extracted their primary assets and eliminated evidence of their operation. What they don't know is that we've been tracking their extraction protocols for months, waiting for them to activate full withdrawal. "What's Kingfisher contingency?" Boone asked, the operation name that had taken his father's life, now apparently connected to current events in ways he couldn't yet understand. "A counterintelligence protocol designed to track compromised assets back to their handlers," Marshfield explained. "We allow the extraction to proceed while maintaining surveillance, identifying the full network rather than just the visible operators." She turned to face them directly, her expression now revealing the full weight of the situation. "I'm temporarily commissioning all three of you as intelligence operators under my direct command. This is irregular, unprecedented, and absolutely necessary given the circumstances. You've already demonstrated exceptional awareness and adaptability, qualities we need right now." "And if we decline?" Rafe asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Then you return to your quarters and resume regular training tomorrow," Marshfield replied simply, "with the understanding that what you've seen here remains classified beyond your current clearance level." Once again, the three exchanged glances, unspoken communication flowing between them. They had come too far, seen too much to step back now. More importantly, each recognized that this moment represented something beyond standard military service, a direct opportunity to counter a threat to the very systems they had committed to defending. "What's the mission, Admiral?" Boone asked, repeating his earlier acceptance, but now with fuller understanding of the stakes involved. The operation moved swiftly. Using resources Boone hadn't imagined available at a training facility, they were equipped with tactical gear, communication systems, and weapons far beyond standard issue. Within hours, they were aboard an unmarked fast attack craft, intercepting the extraction team's maritime rendezvous point. The extraction vessel, ostensibly a commercial fishing trawler with significant modifications, had no idea it was under surveillance as Quinlan and the other extracted assets transferred from the helicopters. Commander Blackwell was visibly under duress now, no longer maintaining any pretense of willing participation. Blackwell was a legitimate officer, Marshfield explained as they monitored from a distance. Compromised through leverage rather than ideology. They're taking him because he knows too much about their operation. "And Quinlan?" Boone asked, observing through high-powered optics as their former squad mate efficiently organized the secure transfer of what appeared to be data storage devices. "A second-generation asset," Marshfield revealed. "His father was placed in naval special warfare 30 years ago, creating the foundation for his son's eventual recruitment and placement. The family history, the exceptional skills, all carefully cultivated across decades. The revelation casts their entire training experience in a new light. The quiet competence Quinlan had demonstrated wasn't just natural talent or dedicated practice, but the result of lifelong preparation for his role. As they prepared to move into boarding position, Marshfield pulled Boone aside for a private word. "You should know the truth before we engage," she said quietly. Operation Kingfisher 15 years ago wasn't just a hostage extraction. It was our first attempt to counter this infiltration program after we discovered initial evidence of long-term asset placement. "My father," Boone began, struggling to process the implications, "was one of my most trusted operators," Marshfield confirmed. "He discovered evidence that his own commanding officer had been compromised, documented it, brought it to me directly when I was still a field commander. When our operation was betrayed from within, your father made the decision to ensure the evidence reached higher command, even at the cost of extraction." She held his gaze steadily. "He didn't die in any training accident, Castellano. He died making sure we would eventually find the full network. Everything we're doing now builds on the foundation he helped establish." Before Boone could fully process this revelation, their tactical officer signaled that they were in position for the intercept operation. The boarding action proceeded with precision until they encountered unexpected resistance, not just from Quinlan and his team, but from assets hidden aboard the extraction vessel. In the ensuing firefight, Boone found himself face-to-face with Quinlan in the vessel's communication center. "Your father was a traitor to his commanding officer," Quinlan stated coldly, weapon aimed at Boone's center mass. "He abandoned his team during Kingfisher, prioritizing documents over lives. My father died because of his choice." "Your father was a foreign asset who betrayed his country and his oath," Boone countered, maintaining tactical position while processing this new perspective on events he'd never fully understood. "Countries change, allegiances shift," Quinlan replied with disturbing conviction. "The only constant is power and who controls it. Your family legacy is built on lies, just like this entire program." In that moment, Boone faced a choice that transcended their immediate tactical situation: vengeance for years of uncertainty about his father's death, or adherence to the mission objectives Marshfield had established. Despite the personal justification for lethal force, he chose the latter, executing a precision-disabling shot that neutralized Quinlan without killing him. "Asset secured," Boone reported through his tactical communication system as he secured Quinlan's weapons. "Intelligence priority intact." The extraction vessel and its occupants were secured within 20 minutes. The operation executed with efficiency that belied the trainee status Boone, Rafe, and Zarya had officially held just hours earlier. Commander Blackwell was recovered alive, though injured, along with comprehensive intelligence on the infiltration network that had operated undetected for decades. As they returned to base with their secured assets, Boone observed Admiral Marshfield conducting preliminary interrogation of Quinlan in the vessel's secure compartment. The exchange revealed an unsettling reality. Quinlan genuinely believed in the legitimacy of his actions, seeing himself as part of a necessary counterbalance to American military dominance rather than as a traitor to his oath. "Ideological recruitment," Marshfield explained later as they processed the implications. "The most effective long-term assets aren't motivated by money or coercion, but by genuine belief in their cause. They planted the seeds for his worldview before he was old enough to recognize the manipulation." Back at the training facility, now under complete security lockdown, the full scope of the infiltration became clear through interrogation of captured assets and analysis of secured intelligence. The operation had targeted not just Navy SEALs, but all U.S. Special Operations communities, placing carefully selected and cultivated assets in positions where they could access sensitive information or influence. Critical operations. "This isn't just about intelligence gathering," Rafe observed during the analysis briefing. "This is about having positioned assets capable of sabotaging special operations at critical moments during potential future conflicts." "Precisely," Marshfield confirmed. "Imagine key personnel failing at precisely the wrong moment during a sensitive hostage rescue, nuclear material interdiction, or counterterrorism operation. The strategic implications are staggering. In a classified debriefing with senior military leadership, Marshfield revealed the complete truth about Operation Kingfisher and its connection to current events. The operation 15 years earlier had been the first concrete evidence of the infiltration program, with James Castellano instrumental in securing proof that certain special operations commanders had been compromised. The official story about training accidents and operational failures was necessary security at the time, Marshfield explained to Boone privately after the briefing. We couldn't reveal what we'd discovered without compromising our ability to track the full network. At a secured facility away from the main training complex, Marshfield presented Boone with his father's actual service records and previously classified commendations. Documentation of operations and actions that had never been acknowledged in official histories. He never sought recognition, she told him, passing over a file containing photographs, after-action reports, and personal effects that had been secured for 15 years. Like many of our best operators, his greatest achievements remain known only to those who served alongside him. Boone opened the file to find a handwritten letter addressed to him, sealed since his father's death. The paper had yellowed slightly with age, but the words remained clear, a father's explanation to his son about choices made and prices paid in service to principles larger than personal recognition or even family connection. He's right here with us, isn't he? The quiet one who never boasts about their accomplishments, the person whose authority comes not from rank or title, but from demonstrated capability and integrity. Share your story below about the quietly competent people who've shaped your life, and subscribe to explore more stories about true leadership and sacrifice. The extraction team's vessel was secured and under escort back to Naval Station Norfolk, moving through the darkness of the Atlantic, with lights dimmed and communications restricted to secure channels. Inside the vessel's makeshift brig, Quinlan Frost sat in silence, his posture still maintaining the disciplined control that had been his hallmark during training. The difference now was the absence of pretense. His eyes revealed a calculating intelligence no longer masked by the affect of a dedicated but unremarkable candidate. Boone observed him through the secured viewport, trying to reconcile the squad. Mate he'd trained alongside for months with the foreign asset now in custody. How much of what they'd seen had been genuine? The marksmanship skills were real enough, as were the tactical abilities, but the personality, the occasional camaraderie, the shared suffering through brutal training evolutions, how much had been calculation versus authentic experience? He won't talk to conventional interrogators, Admiral Marshfield noted, joining Boone at the observation point. His conditioning is too thorough, but he might talk to you. Why would he? Boone asked, genuinely curious. Because you share something significant. Both of you lost fathers to the same operation. Different sides, different perspectives, but a shared foundation of personal loss tied to larger geopolitical forces. Boone considered this. His father's letter had revealed much, but also created new questions about Operation Kingfisher and the events that had shaped his family's trajectory. Perhaps Quinlan held pieces to that puzzle from the opposing perspective. When he entered the secured compartment, Quinlan's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of what might have been genuine respect, quickly masked behind professional neutrality. "Come to gloat, Castellano?" Quinlan asked, his voice carrying none of the animosity that might be expected from a captured operative. "No." Boone took the seat across from him. "I came to understand." "Understand what? That I betrayed your precious program? That I was never truly your teammate?" "I understand those parts," Boone replied evenly. "What I don't understand is why someone with your abilities would believe he was serving a greater good by undermining American special operations capabilities." A ghost of a smile touched Quinlan's lips. "You think this is about nations? About flags and pledges and artificial boundaries? This is about power equilibrium. One dominant military force creates global instability. Multiple balanced forces create deterrence. That's the ideology they gave you," Boone observed. "The question is when they started shaping your worldview, before or after your father's death." The question hit its mark. Quinlan's carefully maintained composure slipped momentarily, revealing something raw beneath. "My father made his choices based on seeing American exceptionalism for what it really was. I made mine based on what happened to him afterward." "Which was what exactly?" Boone pressed. Your perspective on Kingfisher seems to differ significantly from the evidence. Evidence provided by the very institution that abandoned him, Quinlan countered. My father identified corruption within Special Operations Command, officers using classified missions for personal profit, diverting resources, compromising operational security. When he reported it through proper channels, he was silenced, made an example of. This version contradicted everything Marshfield had shared and the contents of his father's letter. Yet, Quinlan's convictions seemed genuine. He truly believed this alternative narrative. So your father was the whistleblower, not mine, Boone asked carefully. Your father executed the silencing, Quinlan stated with cold certainty, following orders from his precious Admiral Marshfield. The hero narrative they constructed afterward was typical damage control. Two irreconcilable versions of the same events, both sons absolutely convinced of their father's righteousness, both unable to fully verify the truth of what had happened during a classified operation 15 years earlier. That's not consistent with the evidence I've seen, Boone stated finally. Evidence can be manufactured, Quinlan replied, particularly when it involves intelligence operations. Ask yourself, Castellano, if my objective was truly to undermine American security, why focus on exposing corruption within the system rather than simply gathering conventional intelligence? Why target specific command structures rather than technical capabilities? The question was reasonable enough to give Boone pause. Before he could formulate a response, Marshfield entered the compartment, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts on what she had undoubtedly been monitoring. That's enough for now, Castellano, she stated formally. We've reached our destination. Secure transport is standing by. As they prepared to transfer their prisoners to the specialized intelligence facility at Norfolk, Boone found himself confronted with growing uncertainty, not about his commitment to the mission, but about the absolute clarity with which he had viewed his father's legacy and Marshfield's authority. What if there were elements of truth in Quinlan's perspective, despite the obvious manipulation in his recruitment? The question remained unresolved as they processed into the secure facility, where a full counterintelligence team awaited their arrival. The magnitude of their operation was reflected in the assembled personnel, representatives from Naval Intelligence, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. The Joint Chiefs have been briefed, Marshfield informed them, once the prisoners had been transferred to specialized holding. Kingfisher contingency protocols are now active across all special operations communities. Every candidate and graduate from compromised training cycles is being evaluated. Every command structure is being reviewed for potential penetration. What about us? Zarya asked the question they were all considering. We're still technically candidates in training, despite everything that's happened. That status has been permanently altered, Marshfield replied. Your actions during this operation have demonstrated capabilities beyond conventional training metrics. You have 3 options moving forward. She outlined their choices with characteristic directness. They could return to complete standard SEAL training, leveraging their experience during this operation as advanced qualification for future specialized roles. They could transfer to intelligence operations under Marshfield's direct command, following the infiltration investigation to its conclusion. Or they could accept honorable discharge with generous compensation, acknowledging that what they had witnessed and participated in had fundamentally changed their relationship with conventional military structures. You have 24 hours to decide, Marshfield concluded, though I suspect each of you already knows your path forward. During the brief respite that followed, Boone found himself drawn to the secured archives section of the facility. Using the temporary clearance Marshfield had granted him, he accessed the complete unredacted files on Operation Kingfisher, determined to resolve the conflicting narratives presented by Marshfield and Quinlan. What he discovered was more complex than either version had suggested. The operation had indeed targeted corrupt elements within Special Operations Command, but not in the way Quinlan had described. Evidence indicated that Quinlan's father, Commander Victor Frost, had been part of a network of officers facilitating unauthorized intelligence sharing with foreign partners, not for personal profit, but based on ideological conviction that certain information should be shared despite official classification. James Castellano had discovered this network while serving under Frost's command. His decision to report to then-Commander Marshfield, rather than through standard channels, had been based on uncertainty about how far the compromise extended. The operation had gone wrong when the unauthorized network detected the investigation and attempted to eliminate both the investigators and the evidence simultaneously. In the ensuing chaos, both James Castellano and Victor Frost had been killed, neither directly by the other, but both casualties of a system fracturing from within. Most disturbing was the evidence that elements of this ideological network had survived, evolving into the more sophisticated infiltration program they were currently combating. What had begun as unofficial intelligence sharing by officers who believed in more open cooperation between nominal allies had transformed into systematic placement of controlled assets throughout special operations infrastructure. When Boone brought these findings to Marshfield, her response surprised him. Rather than dismissing Quinlan's perspective entirely, she acknowledged the complexity of the situation. "Intelligence work is rarely about absolute right and wrong," she said after reviewing his analysis. "It's about competing priorities, competing loyalties, competing visions of security." Victor Frost genuinely believed that certain artificial barriers to intelligence sharing undermined global security. Your father equally genuinely believed that command structures and classification protocols existed for legitimate reasons. "And you?" Boone pressed. "Where did you stand?" "I stood then where I stand now, with the oath I took and the institutions I serve, even while recognizing their imperfections," Marshfield answered. The problem wasn't Frost's desire for a more cooperative international security architecture. It was his willingness to unilaterally decide which classified information should be shared outside authorized channels. This nuanced perspective didn't fully exonerate either side, but it provided context that helped Boone understand how intelligent, dedicated professionals could find themselves on opposing sides of an institutional conflict. The following morning, representatives from the highest levels of military leadership arrived at Norfolk for a comprehensive briefing on the infiltration network and the counter-operation that had exposed it. The Secretary of Defense himself led the delegation, accompanied by the Joint Chiefs and Directors of relevant intelligence agencies. What followed was the most extraordinary gathering Boone had ever witnessed. Frank discussion of vulnerabilities within America's most elite military units, acknowledgement of systemic blind spots that had allowed the infiltration to succeed, and debate about appropriate responses that balanced security concerns with diplomatic realities. Throughout the briefing, Admiral Marshfield commanded the room not through rank or title, but through the depth of her knowledge and the clarity of her analysis. Even officials, technically her superiors, deferred to her assessment of the situation and recommendations for containment. When the Secretary of Defense formally addressed the room, his statement confirmed what Boone had already deduced from context. "For those of you without appropriate clearance, I should clarify Admiral Marshfield's actual position," he stated. While her public role as Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command is legitimate, her primary responsibility for the past 7 years has been as Director of Naval Intelligence, a position deliberately kept classified at the highest levels to facilitate her personal oversight of counterintelligence operations, like the one we're discussing today. The revelation rippled through the room, though Boone noted that many senior officials showed no surprise. They had clearly been aware of Marshfield's actual authority all along. The decision to maintain this operational cover was not made lightly, the Secretary continued, but it has proven invaluable in identifying and countering sophisticated infiltration efforts that specifically targeted our command and control structures. By operating with a deliberately understated public profile, Admiral Marshfield has been able to move through military and intelligence circles without triggering the counter-surveillance measures we now know were in place. What followed was a comprehensive debriefing on the full scope of Marshfield's shadow investigation. Years of careful observation, pattern analysis, and targeted counterintelligence operations, culminating in the training center operation that had finally exposed the full network. The infiltration program specifically targeted what they perceived as our blind spot, Marshfield explained during her presentation. The assumption that threats would come from outside our systems rather than through them. By placing assets in training programs rather than attempting to recruit established operators, they created loyalty that preceded service rather than compromising it afterward. The implications were profound, not just for military security, but for the fundamental approach to personnel development and deployment throughout sensitive government functions. As the briefing concluded and action plans were established, the Secretary of Defense made one final announcement that changed everything for Boone, Rafe, and Zarya. In recognition of their extraordinary service during this operation, I am authorizing field commissions for Castellano, Thatcher, and Kapoor, effective immediately. Their ranks and specific assignments will be determined in consultation with Admiral Marshfield, but their transition from candidates to commissioned officers is approved at the highest level. The extraordinary nature of this announcement, field commissions being exceptionally rare outside active combat zones, underscored the significance of what they had accomplished and the unique position they now occupied within the system. It's unprecedented, Rafe noted later, as they processed the implications of their new status. Field commissions for trainees who haven't even completed basic qualification. Nothing about this situation has precedent, Zarya pointed out. We've operated as intelligence assets in a counter-espionage operation, while officially being SEAL candidates. Normal protocols stopped applying the moment Admiral Marshfield recruited us. Boone remained quieter than usual, still processing everything he had learned about his father, about Quinlan's father, and about the complex interplay between individual actions and institutional imperatives that had shaped both their lives. When Marshfield summoned them to her temporary office at Norfolk the following day, she laid out their options with characteristic directness. Your field commissions allow significant flexibility in your next assignments, she explained. Thatcher, your analytical capabilities would be valuable in the technical counterintelligence division we're establishing to monitor for similar infiltration patterns across other government sectors. Kapoor, your exceptional adaptability and interpersonal insight would make you an ideal field operative for human intelligence operations. And me? Boone asked when she paused. You have a more complex path, Castellano, Marshfield acknowledged. Your father's legacy and your personal connection to this operation create both opportunities and complications. My recommendation is that you complete SEAL qualification as originally intended, but with specialized cross-training in counterintelligence methodologies. There's significant value in having operators who understand both worlds. Before they could discuss these options further, an aide entered with an urgent message. The extraction vessel they had secured was now the focus of intense diplomatic activity, with multiple nations denying any connection to the operation, while simultaneously making discreet inquiries about the status of detained personnel. They're activating diplomatic protection protocols, Marshfield observed, attempting to reclassify their assets as official representatives entitled to diplomatic immunity. Can they do that retroactively? Zarya asked. They can attempt it, Marshfield replied, which is why we need to accelerate our public response. The Secretary has authorized a controlled disclosure of certain elements of this operation, carefully framed to protect sources and methods while establishing the legitimacy of our counteraction. What followed was a masterclass in strategic communication. Rather than burying the infiltration discovery or handling it entirely through classified channels, key aspects were selectively prepared for public acknowledgement through appropriate military and intelligence community channels. 3 days later, Boone witnessed the extraordinary spectacle of Admiral Marshfield appearing at a secured press briefing at the Pentagon, now wearing her full dress uniform for the first time since he had met her. The rows of decorations and distinctive insignia of naval intelligence created a visual statement that commanded immediate respect from everyone present. The United States has uncovered and neutralized a sophisticated effort to place controlled assets within our special operations communities, she stated with calm authority. This operation, conducted under my direct supervision with full authorization from appropriate command authorities, has successfully identified the methodology, extent, and objectives of this infiltration attempt. Without revealing classified details, she outlined the general nature of the threat and the comprehensive response now underway across all military branches. The assembled press corps, initially skeptical, grew increasingly attentive as the implications became clear. This was not a minor security incident, but a fundamental challenge to military integrity. When questioned about her own role, which many journalists noted had previously maintained a distinctly lower public profile than would be expected for someone of her rank and responsibility, Marshfield's response became the soundbite that would define the entire situation. "In my experience, command presence isn't conferred by rank or demanded by volume," she stated. "It's earned through competence, integrity, and the willingness to stand alone when necessary. The uniform doesn't make. The sailor gives meaning to the uniform." The statement resonated far beyond the immediate context of the security breach, touching on fundamental principles of leadership and service that transcended specific military contexts. Following the public disclosure, the diplomatic maneuvering intensified. Nations that had previously denied any involvement suddenly proposed intelligence sharing agreements and joint security protocols, attempting to reframe their infiltration efforts as misguided attempts at closer cooperation outside formal channels. "It's actually quite elegant," Rafe observed during their next briefing. "They're retroactively adopting Quinlan's father's original rationale, claiming this was about equalizing information asymmetry rather than undermining security. The truth likely contains elements of both motivations," Marshfield acknowledged. "Nations rarely act from single pure motivations any more than individuals do. The desire for intelligence advantage coexists with genuine security concerns about information disparities." This nuanced perspective characterized Marshfield's approach throughout the complex resolution process that followed, firm on accountability while recognizing the legitimate security interests that sometimes drove even adversarial actions. 1 month after the initial operation, the training class graduated at Coronado, with Boone, Rafe, and Zaria receiving their commissions in a ceremony that carefully balanced public acknowledgement of their contributions with appropriate discretion regarding classified details. During the ceremony, Marshfield appeared in her full official capacity for the first time, her speech to the graduates focusing not on the specific security threat, but on broader principles of service and integrity. "You are entering service during a time when the lines between allies and adversaries, between warfighting and intelligence, between national and global security, have never been more complex," she told the assembled graduates. "Your greatest challenges won't be physical or technical, but ethical and contextual, knowing when to follow established protocols and when circumstances require adaptive judgment." For Boone, the ceremony represented not just professional recognition, but personal resolution. His father's service had been officially acknowledged beyond the limited family notifications previously provided, with James Castellano posthumously awarded the Intelligence Star for exceptional service in an operation that could now be partially declassified. More meaningful than the formal recognition was Marshfield's private conversation with Boone's mother, who had been invited to the ceremony with appropriate security clearances temporarily granted to allow her to understand more about her husband's final mission. "James made choices that saved lives and preserved institutional integrity," Marshfield told her, the Admiral's usual professional reserve softening slightly. "He never sought recognition. That wasn't his motivation. But he deserved to have his family understand that he died protecting principles larger than any single organization or mission." He always told Boone that true authority came from character, not rank, his mother replied, her composure maintained despite the emotion of the moment. "I see now what he meant." In the months that followed, Boone completed his specialized training track, combining SEAL qualification with counterintelligence methodologies as Marshfield had recommended. Rafe and Zaria pursued their respective assignments, occasionally reuniting during joint operations, targeting remnants of the infiltration network. The broader military and intelligence communities underwent significant structural reforms, implementing lessons learned from the infiltration discovery. Training protocols were modified, evaluation metrics reassessed, and command accountability structures strengthened against similar vulnerabilities. Throughout this transformation, Admiral Marshfield maintained her dual role, publicly representing Naval Special Warfare Command, when appropriate while continuing her classified leadership of naval intelligence. The strategic advantage of her deliberately understated public profile had been proven too valuable to abandon, even after the specific operation that had demonstrated its effectiveness. 1 year after the Coronado operation, Boone found himself at another military installation, observing a new class of special operations, candidates progressing through early training evolutions. As the intelligence liaison officer for the program, his role included identifying potential security vulnerabilities while assessing candidate suitability for specialized tracks. Standing at the edge of the training field, he noticed a familiar figure approaching. Admiral Marshfield, once again dressed in plain, unmarked utilities rather than the formal uniform that reflected her true authority. She still carried her characteristic notebook, still moved with the slight asymmetry that betrayed her prosthetic, still observed with the focused attention that missed nothing significant. A group of candidates noticed her watching their performance, one whispering to another, "Who's that?" Before anyone could answer, Boone stepped forward, now wearing the insignia of an intelligence officer alongside his SEAL qualification. "Focus on your training," he told them, with the quiet confidence he had learned from Marshfield and his father before her. "That's all that matters right now." As they walked away together, Marshfield commented, "They'll never know most of what we do." "Like my father," Boone acknowledged. "Like thousands of others," she corrected him. "The ones who never asked for recognition, but deserved more than anyone else," he finished. They continued their circuit of the training facility, two generations of intelligence professionals united by shared understanding that true authority often wore no insignia, and the most important missions frequently left no visible trace in official histories. In the distance, candidates continued their evolutions, unaware of the complex systems protecting the integrity of the training that would eventually shape them into operators. Some would follow conventional paths, serving with distinction in visible roles. Others would be identified for specialized tracks, moving into the shadow world, where attribution and recognition became secondary to effectiveness and integrity. The security breach that had brought them together had been contained, its perpetrators held accountable through appropriate channels. But the larger lesson remained. Systems were only as secure as the people operating within them. And the most dangerous vulnerabilities often came not from technical failures, but from human ones. As the sun began to set over the training facility, Marshfield paused to observe the candidates completing their final evolution of the day. Her expression revealed nothing of her assessment, but Boone had learned to read the subtle indicators in her posture and attention. "You see potential in the quiet one," he noted, indicating a candidate who performed with exceptional precision while attracting minimal attention. "I see someone who understands that competence speaks louder than self-promotion," Marshfield replied. "That's increasingly rare and increasingly valuable." The observation encapsulated everything Boone had come to understand about true leadership and authority during his extraordinary journey from candidate to commissioned officer. That genuine command presence emanated not from insignia or position, but from the integrity and capability demonstrated when facing complex challenges. They continued their circuit, invisible architects of systems designed to identify both exceptional talent and potential compromise. Their authority carried rather than displayed, their impact measured not in public recognition, but in the continued functioning of institutions they had sworn to protect. As darkness fell and the training field emptied, they passed a memorial recently installed near the administrative building, a simple stone marker commemorating those who had given their lives in service that could never be fully acknowledged. Among the names, etched in modest lettering consistent with all the others, were James Castellano and, notably, Victor Frost, adversaries in life now united in the recognition that service sometimes transcended the clean divisions of institutional loyalty. "Your recommendation?" Marshfield asked, nodding toward the memorial. "Truth matters, even when it's complex," Boone replied, "even when it acknowledges that good people sometimes find themselves on opposing sides of institutional imperatives." Marshfield nodded with subtle approval. Maturity in intelligence work isn't about finding absolute certainty. It's about operating effectively within perpetual ambiguity while maintaining core principles. As they departed the training facility, Boone reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought him from arrogant candidate to his current position. The journey had begun with a moment of humbling revelation, a single word that had collapsed his assumptions and initiated a profound transformation in his understanding of authority, service, and the complex interplay between individual action and institutional purpose. Admiral, a word that had once represented simply rank and positional authority, now carried deeper significance. The embodiment of leadership earned rather than conferred, of influence derived from demonstrated capability rather than formal designation. In the quiet competence of Marshfield's understated command style, in the principled service of his father's sacrifice, in the complex moral landscape that sometimes placed good people on opposing sides of institutional boundaries, Boone had found a definition of authority that transcended conventional hierarchies, one based not on visible indicators, but on the integrity of choices made when facing difficult truths. As they reached the perimeter gate, Marshfield turned to him with a final observation before they parted ways. The most effective authority is often invisible until the moment it's most needed, she said. Remember that when you're tempted to ensure others recognize your position. With that, she departed toward her waiting vehicle, her gait betraying nothing of the prosthetic that had replaced the limb, lost in service, never fully acknowledged in official records. Just another officer completing another day of routine duties, her true impact known only to those with clearance to understand the full scope of her responsibility. Boone watched her departure, understanding now what his father had tried to teach him years earlier. That true command presence wasn't about position or perception, but about the quiet certainty that came from absolute competence and unwavering principle. Everything else was just insignia. We all know someone whose authority comes not from their title, but from their character. Not from their position, but from their actions. Someone who leads through quiet competence rather than loud declaration. Who has been that person in your life? The mentor whose wisdom shaped you, the colleague whose integrity inspired you, the friend whose quiet strength supported you when it mattered most. Share your story below about the true leaders you've encountered and subscribe to explore more stories about the power of character over credentials.